Just like that slow intro.
That was really nice.
It's nice, right? It's like kind of calming.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, Untitled.
Hey.
Yo, fellow birthday people.
Hey.
Untitled is from a Windows XP background recreated in Hyperfine. Is this supposed to be Bliss?
This is the default Hyperfy.
Really?
Oh, nice.
I just added, this is the trees, and it was a screenshot from the Unmuseums build. I was just doing some footage in that actually.
It also has Windows XP vibes.
It does.
Yeah,
I bet Ash
very
did that. Yeah, I feel like Ash did that on purpose.
Bliss. Although from what I understand, that entire hill is now covered in grape trees. So it's not quite the same level of like idyllic greenness.
What is a grape tree?
Grapevine? Sorry.
Oh.
Yeah. You know, it's funny, as I was saying that, I was like, that's not how you describe that plant. But I couldn't think of the correct word. I was like, great plant, great shrub, great bush, great tree.
That was exciting for me.
I was seeing it in my head and trying to describe it. I'm like, it does kind of look like a tree.
Yeah, small
grape
tree.
bog.
Welcome everybody to another MOCA weekly town hall. It's 12:02 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in Brooklyn. I guess I don't have to do that opening when we're not on the podcast. But thanks everyone for being here. We have myself, Renee, Colborn, Daim, Untitled. What a motley crew we have here. We're missing just Anubis, and we would have everyone represented. We'll see if Anubis rolls out of bed to make it. What's up, everybody?
Not everybody all at once.
That's fair. I guess we can start here. Are we back?
So bad.
Were we ever gone?
Yeah.
We were here. Is everyone else back? I think that's the question.
Yeah, it's a good question. Like, we have been here all the time.
Not like
Yeah.
not like a back, like I know, like the grand we, the overarching we.
Well, you can't tariff the metaverse. You can't do it.
I saw Barat tweet that all the scammers and whatever people are back, but I don't really see anybody back.
Is that the?
Yeah, I didn't know what that was about.
I was wondering where that came from. It got like 800 likes.
I don't know. I feel like there's such a strong. I don't even know what to call it. Like, the scene is so ready to be critical of artists that haven't. I don't know. Consistently posted daily during the worst of the whole thing, regardless of what the reason for that may have been. Like, I think for some people, artists that haven't declared their unending fealty for the scene every day in the past 5 years are almost as bad as actual scammers.
I don't consider us back until my degenerate Ape Academy Solana NFT PFP sells for the 19 ETH that I listed it for in 2023.
Okay, well, any day now then.
Not 19 ETH. That would be crazy. Yeah, any day now. It does have
any day now.
So it's pretty rare.
I had a nice call this morning with an architect friend of mine who wants to get into the metaverse scene. So I was like, I haven't had that kind of call in like, a couple years.
Are we back?
So I was like, hey, that's exciting. I mean, but that is a signal of like, if the death to the metaverse and NFTs vibe has shifted such that people are like, oh, this is interesting. I could take this seriously again. Like that arc is exciting. Maybe it's just gone full cycle with the meme where it was so bad that it's cool again. Hopefully we're getting there. But that I was excited by that because I haven't had one of those talks in a little bit. So we'll see.
When did those kind of talks, like, when were they the most, I guess, frequent? And like, when did they dry up?
During the NFT boom, I was doing like so many different calls and discussions with people, just educational, just like orientation, like to the point where I was thinking about just like recording. I'm sure Colborne's nodding. I'm sure like all of us have done orientation based calls before, but yeah, for architecture, it's confusing. They don't know where to start, and they still don't know where to start. So, but that was really hot when people were selling NFTs and people were buying NFTs.
Back in the
I mean, I think there's lots of optimistic signs of, of even if we're not fully back yet, that we're rolling in that direction. But also, I gotta say, like, some personal nonsense I've dealt with this week also makes me think we're still probably not quite where we need to be in terms of like ease of use and like user interface sensibility and all that. Like, I set up some new ledgers and it was a nightmare. Like, should have taken like 10 minutes, and I spent a literal 3 hours struggling to sort of get everything that I was trying to get working to the point where it was working the way it should have been. And I'm not talking about purely the ledgers that are processed. Like, I was trying to do specific things that made me have to order a new ledger because it seems like unless a Web3 app is specially customized for your particular hardware wallet, it's like a complete crapshoot whether or not it will ever work. And yeah, like, obviously the easiest thing is to just use software wallets for people, but then especially if they're new to the scene, like, how long before they get scammed out of everything? And you try to nudge people towards hardware wallets, and like, they're going to be cursing your name because of the myriad technical issues. I don't even know who to blame for, by the way, but which are like very much there. And like, I think the eternal bloom of crypto is gonna come when we have shit that like is reasonably straightforward for grandma to use, which I don't even know how far we are from that.
I mean, I think that's the great hope of like a coming super cycle for me. I was talking to a friend of mine and kind of explaining like what I do to her, like what crypto art is, what this whole movement is about. And she made the point that everybody for years and years have been making, which is like, well, what do you do with this art? Like, how do you even look at it? And I was like, well, you have hit very quickly on like the most fundamental pain point of crypto art, which is you own all this art and there's like not a ton of opportunity or ability to like display it and look at it and have it around your life, right? It's like anticipatory of technologies that have yet to come, like AR and VR. And Daim, I think you bring up a great point with like the difficulty with ledgers. I know internally in the museum, Colborne, you've been talking about like the difficulty of like moving assets around with ledgers, and like MetaMask is still such a shit show in terms of like its inability to be user friendly. Like the UI UX is just bad. And I hope and pray that like if there's long-term, like some kind of heightened crazed interest in crypto in general, that it's going to inspire people to actually make like common sense UI UX updates to all of these apps, better wallets, better display technologies. Like, obviously the cycles are going to come and go. There will be up, there will be down, there will be interest in NFTs, there won't be interest in NFTs. But like, it's so hard now, especially in like for years in this doldrum period, to convince anyone outside of this movement that there's like something interesting happening here, because the technology that is needed to access it is still so rudimentary.
Yeah, and I feel like especially when it comes to like all the login bullshit, which I feel like happens regularly, even with like very high profile projects. Like I'm pretty sure I remember the Pengu Claim web app having had like hardware wallet issues, and like again, I don't fully have an understanding of what causes these issues to happen, but I'm pretty sure like maturity for crypto will be when we get to a point that there's like one or like a very small number of sort of high level ways to handle logging in, and neither the wallet neither the hardware makers nor the web app creators are gonna have to like worry and like stress themselves out about how exactly this is handled, and how different hardwares do these things. Like right now, clearly whatever is exactly happening, it's just lower level than it should be.
Honestly, though, I kind of want to take a step back and praise this, because this is how we as individuals make money in a society that is increasingly centralized, right? Because if you have the wherewithal to figure it out ahead of somebody else, that's a barrier of entry that makes it valuable to you. And
Yeah, that's true.
This is kind of coming on the back of seeing that one of these ETH treasury companies just purchased a ape CryptoPunk for $5 million in stock, and that got me thinking of it's very rare that individuals can front run corporations, and that has consistently happened in crypto, and it's generated a ton of wealth for these individuals, and it definitely presents business opportunities down the line for people to continue to perfect these things and put themselves in position to be there. But it's also like I think an unprecedented ability for us as creative, determined individuals to like persist and get ahead of kind of maybe the risk curve.
It's an interesting point of view.
Yeah. I think also kind of alongside that, it's very it runs against the grain of what the technology really is about, to consolidate too much into one wallet, one solution, one custodian, whatever. Like so I think it's weird. We have like kind of the older users among us, like we're used to things being really gritty and raw and self-sovereign. And I feel like as soon as it starts to get too consolidated and too monopolized, then we're back where we were, kind of from the system we wanted to get away from. So
well, or we'll probably start making new shit that intentionally doesn't jive with whatever has coalesced.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. It's a weird kind of moment we're in, because it is clear that bigger groups are seeing the value in all of this, and they're starting to invest into it. They're starting to invest a lot. So I think like with that there's gonna be a long tail effect of a lot of new things and tools that probably come out over the next, I don't know. What do you guys think? Like next 6-12 months are going to be, I feel like there's going to be a lot of new companies or a lot of changes that start to happen.
Same cycle, right? Like crypto goes crazy. The people that were out come back in, they go raise $50 to $100 million. They blow it fast, seeking attention. It would be interesting to do like a post-mortem of the cycle and see who raised and who's left, because there's really not that many. I can't think of very many companies, businesses, whatever, that were in this space or adjacent to this space that survived.
Yeah, I would say like 95% died, even more maybe.
Yeah.
I just saw something yesterday night. It was Pixel something or other.
Vault.
Pixel Vault, maybe something shut down.
Yeah, Pixel Vault announced that they're shutting down. Yep.
Fuck.
They raised, we talked about them before, but they raised 100 million, countless more millions through the like dozens of collections they released in multiple currencies. But they're an example too of like they just pivoted themselves out of existence. And I think a lot of it's kind of like there's the pivoting, which can kill something just by stretching yourself across too many narratives, or if you just stick to one narrative too long and just you don't get the right timing, can't get the right business model. It does feel like if you raised money, you're likely to die. I don't know. It's kind of a strange thing.
Well, I feel like there's so much short-term positioning, right? To like chase wherever the market has been.
Yeah.
There's very little like foresight, it seems to me, or like creativity in terms of foresight. I mean, part of that's a result, it seems to me, of like none of these platforms or companies are powerful enough to like have an effect on the movement of the market forward. They're all kind of like chasing after where it is, or like putting their faith in like certain signs of where the market's going. But like,
Yeah, I think it also has to do with the fact that once like venture capitalists invest money into your company and like the valuations are crazily high, something needs to like justify that. And then they tell you, oh, like your company is now worth $500 million. Like, I don't know, you need to hire 500 people. Otherwise, like my investment doesn't make sense. So grow this thing, and like you do it by hiring hundreds of people, and then you have like a huge overhead of resources that have no idea where to move because the space is just too small, and the ideation process should still be going, and like people should experiment and not execute one thing that the venture capital people say like this is what we invest in, and now you head that direction. And then I think many founders don't even have a chance to like stand against that because the power has moved to the investors and they don't necessarily know what to do. And there are various projects where that became the case.
But then, Renee, you have 500 daily active users, and that's exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all you need.
And I think that's exactly it in so many cases. Like a lot of stuff that crypto companies and organizations try to do, not all of them obviously, but a lot of them just really seem like things that could be run and maintained almost indefinitely on like a shoestring budget and a skeleton crew. And when you decide that the more important thing is to be a mighty powerful company that spends in accordance with how it's valued, well then you're probably gonna fucking run it out of cash a few months or a year or two after the cycle hits its next slump, and you're gonna go out of business, even though probably a tenth of the money could have been used to keep things going for the next 10 years.
Yeah,
Not sexy though.
Not sexy. Yeah, that's the problem.
Isn't it wild
That's-
too that it's like all of these things, all of these challenges and hurdles? You have an emerging industry, you have the incoming AI revolution, you have all these regulation issues, just kind of cultural, feelings around crypto in general, and then you have art. And it's like trying to temper all of those emotions, or kind of like all of those different ranges, and then art being this kind of strange catalyst in the mix of all of it. It's so wild. It's fascinating, but it's also like you're wrangling. It feels like this technology really wrangles around, has come around or coalesced around art in an unusual way. And I don't know. It's funny to me that it's that and not something. I mean, stable coins might be the antithesis of that, where it's just like very clear what it does and what the value prop is and whatever. But like, it feels like that's kind of the contrast this cycle versus last, where it might have been NFTs prior, and now if it's stable coins, then it's kind of a funny contrast, I guess.
The surprising thing to me is that like I know it's present in like small ways, but that pornography hasn't sort of become a bigger or even the crypto use case, especially with like increasing incidence of companies getting shut down for like censorship related reasons.
The rails of crypto remain on like these centralized platforms, like the fact like the whole NFT movement takes place on Twitter. That Twitter, with its like corporate interests, is trying to stop, like any kind of what's the word? Any kind of controversial activity.
Right. But I mean, there will eventually come a point where at least some places around the world, you'll start to be able to get by without ever converting back to fiat money. And when that happens, on like like a true fundamental level in a country or two, such that like even businesses can exist without ever owning or touching fiat currency, then I think floodgates will open, because suddenly it doesn't matter anymore. At least on that side, which is a big part, that traditional companies may hold their noses and not want to do business with you.
It's wild, waiting for that day. But like, it's getting more and more clear if we compare the situation right now to the situation like 4 years ago, during when the last bull run started. Like, everybody was dreaming about an adoption from institutions like we have right now. And it seems to me that these stablecoin infrastructure is going to be the point around everything is resolving, especially on EVM chains. And yeah, I'm pretty sure that when you have like money on these chains, like, I don't know, Ethereum, Base, Avalanche, Polygon, like even Solana, like outside of EVM, everything will have such a high adoption. And you can just interject on that protocol level instead of using a vendor like PayPal or all the others, which are doing nothing else than utilizing these protocols in the back end and directly pay the vendor using this standardized way. Because in the end, what they have is probably, I receive stablecoin in my address and it is automatically forwarded by the custodian that I have to my bank account, in case something like that exists at that point still, or the front end that they use for their online banking is just a representation of the balances in their smart account or whatever technology they are going to use, which is crypto native in the end.
I agree with that. We knock it a lot, but if you go back 4 or 5 years ago, we were praying for a lot of these developments.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think this has been the crux of my newsletter for like months and months now. It seems it's like we had really no idea what the third and fourth order effects of like all this adoption would be, or where it would centralized. That like, I mean, I think we were naive in a way that like our values and our maintain control in a world of more centralized adoption. Like, of course, if larger actors are going to come in and invest in the space, they're going to want to control like the flow of everything. So maybe I was naive. Maybe we were all a little naive.
I think it's double-edged. I think our naivete took us far, and I think our like opposition to the contemporary art world made us almost interesting. So it kind of pushed it further. But I think you're right also in that we found a middling, because also like if Christie's and Sotheby's weren't selling NFTs and they have this long-standing thing as an institution, we might be left with like no marketplace. Or no middleman. It might be beholden on kind of legacy social media or very, very fragmented. So, you know, the fact that they're still willing to make a market around it and there's 200 years of legacy and it's folded into evening sales and contemporary art auctions is, I've softened on that. Not that it's necessary, but it does provide a legitimacy, I think, that helps it graft into maybe a contemporary art canon.
Yeah, it's maturing. It's maturing. I think it's like it can still have been more fun or interesting when it wasn't mature. You know, like it's certainly far more interesting when like none of that stuff was around, honestly. But in terms of it being, this happens with anything, right? Like it's just like the evolution of a neighborhood is the same way. It starts with the artists who kind of are willing to take a risk in an abandoned building and do interesting things, gravitate more stuff. Then the coffee shop opens up, you know, rent gets higher. And then all of a sudden you have like a, you know, Chase Bank on the bottom floor and no more rent stabilization or anything. And it's a penthouse above it. You know, it's just, this is the evolution of things when it gets into that cycle.
And maybe we should talk about also like the liquidity that platforms like Gandhi are unlocking for people to make more moves. And, you know, there's, you know, 8-figure Picasso paintings that banks will finance and use as collateral. And now we have kind of decentralized providers that are providing collateral for your X copies. Then people can go make more moves. And, you know, the more this system moves, I think the higher floors become. There's more locked up supply. There's more liquidity in general. And, you know, we can say art for art, but there is a financial sustainability that needs to be achieved as well. I know this is very unlike me, but
yeah, just throwing me off.
But maybe, I don't know. I'll make different points, I guess.
No, it's weird. It's like I had a creative friend who's outside of this ecosystem asked me the other day, and like it feels validating in a way, right? That like, you know, a lot of these institutions are now kind of turning around. We haven't gotten Jamie Dimon yet, but he's pretty close, like pretty close. But yeah, the last cycle, if you guys remember, there were like diamond dips. Whenever he would go out and say something negative, Bitcoin would go down like 8%. Like that was his impact. And so whenever you got a rat poison, or maybe it was Buffett, but like it would dip like that. But I mean, all of these groups are coming around, and while it's sort of it is a weird feeling, but it is also validating to know, all right, we were on to something earlier on, and it does have value and whatever. But so yeah, when you see cultural institutions really starting to dig into this further, that's exciting, even if it's not, you know, the kind of earlier groups that we wanted to stick around, and maybe they haven't been able to, that kind of thing. But yeah, I don't know. What does it look like 10 years from now? What is adoption? What's after? I mean, maybe it's just Jamie Dimon and like Vanguard holding out as far as they can. But Like what is the next cycle? What is that adoption even? Is there a next cycle? I don't know.
Up only forever.
Super cycle. Let's go.
That's
I
what
did-
I think, Corbin, you have like good thoughts on what is happening beyond cycles. Like what happens like when everybody has exposure, including the institutions we were waiting for and nation states.
Yeah. What does that mean? You know, it would have been crazy 10 years ago to say that Bitcoin is going on the balance sheets and all these treasury companies are being created and it's going into national reserves. And I think probably in the same way, in 10 years, we will see major museums, national collections with this work in there because, of course, this is the inevitable march of where we're going. And the greatest artists of our time will be digital. I think that is just assumed. And, you know, we'll be older and there'll be so many more people under us. And, you know, I have found it increasingly difficult to like also get physical supplies. And I think there has to be an evolution of the capitalism that we're in away from the physicality of things and more things and more things into just, more sustainable digital driven methods. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is it. Like we're the early adopters. People coming in now are still the early adopters. We're gonna look back on this thing and be like, damn, that was crazy because we were right in the same way that people, you know, what would it have been? 2015 Bitcoin.
Yeah, I definitely see physical art becoming an, I don't know if niche is the right word. Maybe less niche, more a luxury thing. But like, yeah, as the population grows, as you said, like as you know, the cost of supplies will probably go, you know, up disproportionately the more time passes. Like the accessibility of digital will be what kind of allows most artists to create and express themselves and you know share their vision and so.
Oh no.
Mic drop.
Oh no.
He
Dang.
wrecked.
Thing.
He was dropping too much truth.
Amazing.
I don't know where I got cut off, but you know, long story short, I'm just saying that I think you know it's gonna be one of those things where the majority of artists are definitely gonna be doing their work digitally and you know going the physical route will become a luxury and like
I mean,
a
it's already a
conscious
luxury.
choice meant to express something thereby, and you know it will eventually cease being the norm, and you know maybe not for the worse, because you know like creating physical things is probably a source of a lot of you know waste and a lot of you know like environmental issues, and you know but I don't think art is at the forefront of that. I think eventually art will follow the curve of sort of not going in that direction anymore.
I mean, it's also like deeply like wasteful for artists themselves in the sense that like you know, if you're buying paint, buying canvases, buying physical tools, like my mom makes a lot of art at home and like just constantly just going through paint, tubes of paint, brushes, like new little I don't know things to dab and swathe paint, like new canvases. And it's just like it's this constant rush. It's like you know the reason we have so many sketches from Matisse and Picasso and these old masters is because they had to continue, like that was how they were practicing their craft. They needed an individual place in which to draw, sketch, paint, model over and over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Like just for individual artists, it's so much less.
Yeah. Not to mention the amount of space all this stuff takes up, not to mention the difficulty in shipping and the chances of damage, and
Great point.
yeah, all that stuff is just difficult. And then, like even displaying physical art, I feel like there's not much talk about that in the scene, probably because most collectors are less sophisticated in the scene than they would like to see themselves as being. But like a lot of painters and like other physical artists, would prefer as much as possible to not have their works behind glass, because glass brings like a whole separate set of issues with like reflection and making the work borderline impossible to like photograph sensibly, and those sort of things. But at the same time, of course, physical work is fragile, and sun will fade it, and exposure to like shitty quality air pollution will cause yet other issues, and just an endless array of things to consider, most of which are kind of trying to, whether on the short term or long term, screw over both the artist and the collector. And like most of those things are just not issues with digital, especially when we get to a point where like displaying digital art becomes as easy or easier as the physical things.
I think the issue that I struggle with is there is such a huge disconnect between the art that is being presented in institutions. I'm not talking about commercial galleries, because commercial galleries have always been on the commercialized sort of pop art for the last 50 years, but there is this weird disconnect that comes from presentation and concept that this space has to go through for the art to be fully accepted and taken seriously. Because I remember when I first joined the space, we all rejected, the sort of the intellectual side of the fine art world. But we ran with our arms open for the commercial side, Christie, Sotheby's, because that gave us the easiest form of validation, right? Which is financial market validation. But then we saw, and this was a big complaint over the last 3 years, right? Which is a good majority of NFT shows and art shows was us basically consuming art the same way we've consumed it in the last 10 years on a screen. The wires are still showing, right? And it's like a lot of these problems have been tackled by the fine art world. So it just seems like, how do you bridge both? Because the other side of it is, you go to a gallery now and there's a sculpture and it's conceptually heavy. The artist is exploring, allegorical themes about their identity and what it means to them, the history of this process, right? Like fabric art and feminism, for example, have been on this insane come up because of its long history of just like women working with fabrics and textiles, right, through like 2000 years. And we're still sort of stuck on like cool video of somebody doing something, and it just, Colburn, we had talked about this 2 years ago, right? Which is like we're still stuck in a content phase, right? Like a heavy content phase. The artwork that's being shared, while it fits like the linguistic definition of an artwork, it is built for the algorithm. It's built to be consumed within 10 seconds and then to be just disregarded for the next, like tweet and retweeted tweet. And it seems like, how do you tackle that, right? And digital art in
but
itself.
but I mean, Anubis, like I agree with you that a lot of what's out there is exactly what you're saying, but like not everything.
Oh yeah, of course.
And
No,
and
not
and
everything.
and so, given that it's not everything, like, isn't this ultimately okay? Like, most of this stuff is probably gonna be forgotten, in 100 years time, and it'll be the very small percentage of stuff that actually had significance and carried meaning and conveyed values and like ideas and all that stuff. That's probably what's gonna be left, that's still remembered. And like, is that much different than with physical art? Like, the amount of stuff that gets made versus the amount of stuff that actually gets, I don't know, noticed and remembered and preserved. I
Well,
imagine it might be even worse, honestly, than with crypto art.
I mean, will the stuff be remembered? Probably not, but there's a clear separation from the good majority of the type of artwork and its conceptual heaviness and its what it is exploring currently in comparison to what we're experiencing in the space, right? And it's, to me, it feels like, to your point, right? Like, digital art is way easier to produce and it's way easier to take care of. I personally will use my iPad for studies before I finish a painting, just because I don't want to waste paint, right? But it there until we figure out certain issue, like the issues of presentation, the issue of texture and depth, because you lose so much detail that most people are not aware of until they look at a physical piece in a gallery that is well lit. There will always be it feels like there will always be that disconnect. And then if we're still stuck on content, then all of it just starts to fall by the wayside, because then slowly everybody will realize what they're consuming, right? uh, like, people still like anime art and concept art and stuff, but you can notice there's been a shift away on the internet away from that, just because it's become the norm and there is no sort of depth to it, right? And it seems like that's sort of the issue that we have to fix in the space, especially because if a conversation about artwork cannot go beyond an hour, and it is you can't go subsurface in it at all, then it feels like it doesn't advance anything. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And it's like the the best digital work, right? Like, X Copy's work is inherently digital, but he has a story that has been continuing since like 2018, if not before. He's in his position because he's what you classify as a pioneer, right? Same with like Wallop, who's a digital artist based in China. Like, you go into concept art circles, he is one of the most famous concept artists out there, but that's because he's been consistently doing it. He pioneered a bunch of, or maybe pioneered the wrong word. He has a very distinct style that he's been consistent with, that then people have started to adopt, right? And what's happening in the space, it feels like, to some degree, that is still happening, but the opposite is also happening, right? Like, you're getting people that are shifting styles as quickly as possible to meet whatever the next hot artist is, and you start to lose a lot of important conversations within that, because nobody's sticking around to develop a strong visual language. They're just gonna like drop it and move on to the next thing the moment a new X copy happens, right? We saw it happen with X copy, we saw it happen with Grant Yun, we saw it happen with um like when photography started, when like Summer Wagner, a bunch of these photographers entered the space, you saw a shift towards that sort of ethereal photography, right? We saw it happen with PFPs and all of that, and it seems like we are left in a much hollower space because of it than in 2020, when everybody was like, this is great, we get to cut out the middleman and actually conceptually conceptually like think about our art and be control of our own sort of careers narrative. I don't This got rejected by these galleries because they didn't think it was commercial, but I liked it, and here it is. And now we're fully back into the commercial side of, like, hot women in pictures and PFPs, right? And it's like all it's like just like this weird recursive thing that consistently happens. Um, and I
But
think
but
also,
but sorry, go
sorry,
ahead.
no, I think because we rejected the fine art side so hard, we have to come to terms with like commercial muck that we're surrounded with on all fronts. You know what I mean?
Well, to me, it feels largely like, I mean, we talk about this every so often, but a really interesting points, Anubis. I think a lot of it is a formatting issue. Like we're all limited to basically the same canvas. Everyone is drawing on the same square rectangle, and they're just yearning for contrast, and we go in these loops of like contrast aesthetics and other things that
Mm-hmm.
look different than the next square or next rectangle, but uh, like what is it, there's like one spherical artist, natural warp, right? Like there, we need to, I think we're going to have a real revolution in terms of media and in terms of artistry when we are broken away from these social apps as the drivers for the format of
Yeah.
what people can share with one another, because empathizing with one another, with narratives, with stories, with aesthetics, it's limited to this, and that's crazy and very inhuman. And I think
Yeah.
once we start to get out into, certainly once we're out in real galleries and different things, but in my mind it's a lot about virtual worlds too, because then we're far less restricted to fit something on a white wall gallery, which is still very rectilinear in a lot of senses. Now we can start to create things that aren't limited to that format, and I think then we're going to have a real renaissance. I think until we get to that point, we're still very much limited to consumption media and
Yeah. Yeah.
an algorithm. To your point, like it's
Yeah.
going to be repetitive, and it's all, frankly, it all looks the same
Yeah.
by and large.
And it's like, it's just a shame because the artists that would be like the artists that would effectively have the really good galleries sink their teeth into them are being rejected in the space. And like I think of somebody like Patricia Infinity, right, where she was like going
Yeah.
into the Middle East and fully 3D scanning like towns that are about to disappear.
Yeah.
Right. I remember on Tezos there was this artist who was going to he was based out of Brazil, and he was going to graves that were effectively slowly getting destroyed and withered over time, and 3D scanning them. And that was, you could have a 3-hour conversation that borders on philosophy, meanings, life, all of that. And the starter for it was like art and the need to sort of catalog this and preserve it. And now they're all gone, right? Because the success the space sort of rejected them for like pudgy penguins and fucking like the next AI hot drop, right? And it's like, that's not to say like me and Daim, we've had discussions about this, right? Which is like it's there will always be good AI artists, right? But the majority are just creating muck, right?
No,
And the
for sure.
space has validated that so heavily that then anybody that is trying to be like, before in 2021 it was like, I make my own models. Whoa, dude, that's cool. Now nobody fucking cares because everybody writes slash imagine on Midjourney, right? Or like slash blend, right? And so it's like I think
Yeah,
that,
I mean
yeah.
the scene definitely doesn't do a great job of rewarding, quality and like um, you know, difference from the crowd in many ways. But I also think like I don't know, all of the things you raise are definitely issues. But I think we also need to remember that when we're saying like, why doesn't crypto art display, you know, as much depth and as much, I don't know, truly great and like truly deep art as not crypto art? Like, how many crypto artists are there? Maybe a few thousand if you're being very generous. If you're not being very generous, if you're talking about artists that, are like primarily focused on crypto art, probably might even be less than 1,000, I would imagine. And we're comparing that against, I don't know, like 99% of artists out there in the rest of the world. Like, it's understandable that we're not stacking up as like having having things at a point where we're ready to dethrone you know all other art from its I don't know, historic place. But again, I think all the stuff you mentioned need to be fixed, but I do think if there were like 10 times the number of crypto artists we have today, and that wasn't like just financially a ridiculous thing for said artists involved, we probably would have at least 10 times the amount of great art than we currently do. Like we are it's hard for me to remember sometime, because being like so involved with the scene, but like we're pretty tiny vanguard at this point, and like a really shittily organized vanguard at that, but tiny too, for sure. And like that brings with it some of that limited impact and limited like variability and diversity too.
I mean, yeah, no, I agree that I think the fear is because we are so limited. If things don't change, then we will disappear by the wayside for an even stronger and bigger movement, right? Because the way I view it, right? If we keep rejecting certain things, then we won't grow to the degree that is needed to then be fully taken seriously, right? And it's like
But I mean, can we even like don't we all take it for granted that like sort of digital art and like the blockchain's place in digital art, which is basically crypto art by any other name, is sort of inevitable. Like maybe the specific people that are currently like big in the scene will be left by the wayside, but I feel like the direction of art on this path that we're all on, like I don't see that anymore as being stoppable, or like I don't see that as being able to fail. Maybe we will fail to keep up with it and like to stay relevant in it, but
I mean, it could be, right? I mean, we could also just see the shift of crypto art become more of like a tool, right? Which is just like the chain and us minting NFTs becomes more akin to the frame rather than the actual canvas in itself. You know what I mean? It just becomes this thing that, like, a painter will go and get oil tubes. They don't give much of a thought about their oil tubes, except if it's like professional quality or not. That's what happens, right? But hey,
I
we'll
mean,
have to see.
yeah. I should mention, whenever I say crypto art, I'm probably using it a bit differently from what people can often mean, but like for me, that's what I mean. For me, crypto art is art that takes the blockchain as its sort of primary mode of release and publication, and I'm okay with like that being sort of the common denominator. And I think the more diversity we can achieve and build on that, is the better.
Yeah. So, guys, when are we finding the next Decentraland? Am I right?
I did want to take a couple moments, because we've been teasing it for weeks and weeks and weeks, to talk just a little bit about token stuff. Kind of just where we're at in that process. And we talked about maybe doing something like that on Tuesday when we had our group call. Anyone want to give an overview of where we're at with token negotiations, discussions? I guess there's no negotiations. That was the poor choice.
I mean, we are in the middle of the process of weaving the tokenomics into the stuff that we are building. And that is the whole library topic, where we envision the future of the curation of knowledge that is preserved by MOCA, by MOCA token staker, and of course also be made accessible to deco holders, but also in whatever tokenomics variation that we come to implement, be accessible to anyone else who wants to access the data that we preserve. We as a museum, and also like the stakers, preserve inside the museum everything about Web3 culture, crypto art, these truths that we are gathering and that we will continue to gather as a community is like a huge pile of data that will be accessible in user interfaces, but also to agents, so that basically everybody will be able to like Q&A that pile of data, like ask questions to the library that's already possible on the v2.museumofcryptoart.com. But it will also be possible to plug this knowledge base into your agent. So we start with the Eliza OS plugin system, where we are currently building out like a bridge to plug this into your agent. So any agent developer can fuel their agent with this knowledge and harness the data from our museum that is curated by the community. And we've been talking about this in a way where like the vision that we see for this in 5 to 10 years is like, if we give this open source museum stack to museums and institutions around the globe, it will be very easy for them to fuel their museum and the visitors of their museums like with the information curated by the MOCA community. And once we get to that point, I think it becomes very, very valuable to be able to navigate or steer the global knowledge and understanding preserved by MOCA about these topics that is harnessed by many, many museums on this planet. At least, I mean, that's one of our main goals, like make the technology that we are building with MOCA rooms and the curation stack for that, powered by Hyperfy, but also like, create, like upload the media. Like right now it's like import NFTs, but at some point will probably be more open, like just like import media and then curate that into like these modular interoperable art exhibitions, and like let agents like guide you through it and talk about the stuff on the wall, like fueled by the understanding and the knowledge about your own institution, and also the stuff that MOCA that you plug in from our institution, from MOCA, if you want to focus on Web3 as well, or like crypto art, which is very, very interesting. Like if we can lower the friction for institutions to integrate this technology and digitize themselves with our operating system, with our museum operating system that we are building and make available to them very low key, so to speak, so also like free of cost because of open source, then like flipping the switch on their side to also aggregate the whole crypto art and like Web3 culture and make it available inside their system and by their agents that they deploy with this operating system for their visitors to talk about their stuff. That's when like the whole idea of MOCA scales across the globe. It's still hard to like put it in words for me or like talk about it at this stage, but this is the broader vision around which we are currently designing the tokenomics for the next decade. And that takes some time because we want to do that right and don't, we want to have like the fundamental core for this fleshed out so that it sustains the test of time for the next years and not revisit it a year from now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was an incredible like forward-looking summary of what we've been talking about. I think I'd just like to add that like, kind of what we talked about on Tuesday was like, how do we continue to implement new reasons over and over again for there to even be a MOCA token? Like, what's the point? We need to constantly be reinventing why there's a point. I think most projects don't do a very good job of this. They kind of like begin a token's lifestyle. Maybe it has governance components, maybe it has staking components, but then the token kind of dies as the functionality of the token dies. And if the idea of creating a token is to create an economy around a project, then that economy necessarily needs to develop. And there's always been, in my opinion, way too much onus on like the community to figure out the value of that token. Like I think that Super has actually done a really good job of this, right? Even if all of their attempts to provide different use cases for their rare token have not always succeeded, the fact that they are constantly kind of trying to find ways to plug the rare token into new offerings and like generating new rewards and new interactions via staking, like I think it's at least interesting. So one of the things that we've been talking about is like, how do we constantly kind of keep the MOCA token at the center of like new tech developments and new like cultural developments, right? Like just being a governance token is boring and doesn't work. It needs to provide access to things. It needs to provide access to tools and programs and opportunities, and it needs to constantly be evolving, right? Not necessarily getting like better, but like necessarily bigger, right? If we're going to create a tool, a new tool, as we do, we've been doing for years, how do we create a bridge within that MOCA token crosses? I think that's what we're revolving around.
Yeah, we're at a really cool, interesting intersection here because of all the AI stuff that we're right at the center of, all the metaverse things that we're right at the center of. And if we can, and our intention is what you're saying, Max, like use the token as a bridge to allow people to access some of these tools, to support their art, their collections, do more things, access more resources. I think we're just at a really interesting, as a cultural institution, as a foundation, as a museum, we're like just right at this interesting moment that bridges a lot of these things together. And I think that's evident in the partnerships that we've had before, but that will also be sharing with the release of this token too. Like, I think there's a ton that we're going to make more accessible to people, and especially in the AI side, what Renee's team and Daim have been building out, I think will really, humanize and make accessible some cool stuff. I'm very excited about that. I think that's something that will make the MOCA token very different than others.
I agree. That was 8 minutes on the MOCA token. Does that seem like enough?
Am I the only face left? Should I go avatar here? This feels very exposing, even if I'm half virtual.
We can also do this.
Oh, wow. See.
Yo, fancy.
I want to put.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's a lot. That's too much.
now you're the face of MOCA.
Nobody needs that.
I may not need it, but
you have too much power, Max. Oh my goodness.
I know, it's the host. Well, it's 104. I think that we gave the people what they wanted, which was 55 minutes of an art conversation and 10 minutes of token tease. So have to be thrilled with that. Why don't we get out of here for the week?
Okay.
So thank you guys for being here. Thank you, Pindar and Awfuleye, for hopping in the chat with us briefly. And you know where to find us on Twitter, and we'll be back here next week. So thanks all. Have a good one.
Awesome.
Bye, everybody.